Thanks, John. So we're ready to get started here. Our audience is adding up, and we're at time. So feel free to begin. Thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, sisters and brothers. Welcome to this important conference. We are talking this morning about localizing the Green Deal. Really, I think nothing is more important. We cannot leave saving the planet to national governments or international institutions. We must all play our part, and municipalities in particular. Now, I'm very pleased that we have Elena Wisner-Malinowska and Ricardo Rio with us. And I'm looking for my agenda to see what happens first. Could somebody advise me, please?
John, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Good morning, this is Thomas. I would like to say maybe some welcome words in the name of Climate Alliance. Please, and then Thomas, you can take over for the moderation. So thank you very much, and welcome for this session. So our president, Mr. Andreas Wolter, the mayor of the city of Cologne, asked me to welcome you for today's meeting. Because he is traveling to Katowice, where he has a meeting conference with the city. So thank you very much for all of the speakers who are here on the podium for being here today. This event, Localizing the European Green Deal, this policy session, is part of our international conference of Climate Alliance, our annual conference, that we are this year trying to organize in a hybrid way. So we have a lot of participants here in the city of Wales, in Austria. So we have some participants on site here in the monastery of the Minoriten in Wales, who are attending this session on site via streaming. And
I think your sound has ended, Thomas.
Mikrofon ausgemacht hatte ich jetzt.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you again.
Okay.
Welcome back.
Yeah, thank you. I was saying that this event is part of our annual conference, Climate Alliance, that we are having here in the city of Wales in Austria, in Upper Austria. And today is the final day of our conference, started yesterday. And one of the key important results of our conference is the adoption of our Climate Alliance Wales Declaration, that we will talk about it later. So I would like to thank Elena from the Commission, Mr. Ricardo Rio, bom dia, ao Prague, and our speakers from cities, from the city of Ghent, Nantes Metropole, Julie Hernus, and from the city of Vienna, Mr. Ritter here from Austria, so they will present themselves later. So thank you very much in the name of the board of Climate Alliance. And John, thank you very much, who is John Tanner from the city of Oxford, who is also part of our board, will take over the moderation. Thank you, John. You have the floor.
Thank you, Thomas. And it gives me the opportunity to thank Thomas Bros for the excellent work he has done with his staff team in organizing this important conference, this important climate assembly. Just a little word about me. My name is John Tanner. I'm speaking to you from Oxford in England. Unfortunately, we are no longer part of the European Union. I apologize. It's a catastrophe, but we must continue to work to defeat the climate emergency. Now, I'm very pleased to introduce Elena Wisnar-Malinovska from the European Commission, who is heading the Office for Climate Action. So no better person to speak to us briefly about what she would like us to do. And then maybe we'll ask her some questions about what we would like her to do. But we're going to hear our two speakers first, and then we're going to have questions. And if people like to write their questions in the Q&A, in the question and answer column on the right-hand side of your screen, then that will be the best way. But first, our speakers. So I would like to give the floor to Elena Wisnar-Malinovska and to welcome her very much to this assembly in Austria.
Thank you very, very much. I'm really pleased to be with you here. I cannot see you. I really regret it. A word on me in my professional life, but also in my private life. I'm a scout by mind and by heart. I'm a passionate nature lover and cyclist. And I'm very happy to be here because I believe very much in making things happen at local level, at citizen level. What I will do now, I will share my presentation. So it takes a little bit of time, but we are definitely back to school, back to work. Yet we know that climate change was not on holiday. So we had yet another summer with excessive heat, with destructive floods, with lives lost, with infrastructure damaged. And it has translated into a lot of these local stories. I'm here in Belgium, in Brussels, and you probably know that Belgium has been hit after decades by a very destructive flood. And there's a lot of discussions going on how to recover psychologically and physically after this. Yet another warning from the international community. I hope you didn't miss the International Climate Panel, another report, which says that indeed climate change is happening at a rate never seen before. And what brings as two really starking new messages is irreversibility. If we will head past the tipping points, the physical tipping points of our planet, we may not be able to go back. And second, a very close connection between extreme events and climate change. You probably feel this has been already decided, but no, it's the first authoritative report that really puts it. Of course, we have to appeal to communities, to cities, to citizens, based on their values and what they cherish most. Talking to economists, we can always show the bills. Talking to nature lovers, we can talk about collapse of ecosystems. To those that have to care about their health because they are more sensitive, we know how a pollution plays with our lungs. And of course, we all cherish our houses, our places, that we don't want to make them disappear under water. But there is a message of hope, and there are some socio-economic tipping points that we are really reaching, because we get this message always back that almost, 96% of Europeans have already taken some of the climate action. That's good. And they feel it's a serious problem. And they want to bring Europe to climate neutrality. Another figure that doesn't appear here, but is important, at least 30% of the interviewed, they want to focus on food and diets. We know how much this is a question of personal choices, but there the direct policy intervention can't do much. This is where indeed we will need the citizens to do the right choices. Now, this is the European Green Deal taken from Brussels in this, you know, huge chart. But for you as a citizen, what is it? Well, it's a vast undertaking. It's not just about the invisible carbon emissions. This is about the restoration of nature. This is about no pollution in your environment. This is about social equity. This is about putting climate protection into law. And we have the first ever EU climate law that was published over the summer. So let me be clear, the direction is very, very clear, and the speed should be too, but we are not yet there. Now, what are the ingredients as we see it of the climate action? It's definitely the vast framework of the Green Deal that can be brought to the micro level of an individual. It's, of course, the legislation and policies and financing that push our governments, that allow our local authorities to call for action. But, you know, very importantly, and so far, a bit more neglected in view of governments is the climate action by European citizens, by communities, the huge societal movement that is out there. And I'm really pleased to see that, for instance, Germany has adopted recommendations by its first ever citizen assembly, where you have very impactful initiatives proposed, like the coal phase out, like the solar panels on new renovated houses, like a preference for public transport over private transport, and so on and so forth. Now, I am the head of the climate adaptation unit, which means that we see already the consequences of the climate, and we need to adapt to what we see. But this is preventive measure, and the new policy setting allows us to edict a more smart adaptation. We need all data we have to prepare for what is out there for tomorrow. We cannot build our houses for today's climate because they will crumble in the future. We need a more systemic adaptation. It cannot be done in you know, a small microcosm. It needs to link, and it needs to be done at all policy levels. You need at your level a support by your government, a support by your region. We also need to go faster. There has been a lot of hesitation to go ahead on climate adaptation, and the clock is ticking even for climate adaptation. You know, the damage means that we failed also on containing the impacts, and nature-based solution, greening our cities, our spaces, preparing our health systems for what is out there are really no regret measures. And we have seen it over the summer. Yet again, another international crisis broke out. And you know the debates that are out there. We need to help people where they are, to help them to cope with the impact of climate change. People don't want always to exit the places they know best. And this is where we need a much more assertive and empathetic help to these communities. Practical help. We know that the local climate adaptation is the most important from all the settings. So we are preparing to launch very soon, on the 7th of October, what we call the Policy Support Facility for cities on climate adaptation, because we do realize that many cities in the Covenant of Mayors, but cities at large, are somehow short of capacity in front of the climate impacts, and there is a need for technical assistance to improve the in-house capacity of these cities, of these communities, of these villages. We need integrated solutions. We need exchanges between peers, and there are many, many frontrunners among you cities. We need to share more good practices. We need to have city labs incubators where cities can experiment. And of course, this must have a no one is left behind support that will be targeted to those that are small, medium-sized, and have lower capacity. And it will be open, of course, to all European Union member states. But John, I hope that, of course, exchange with UK cities should continue. We also are about to launch a major research policy demonstration endeavor, and it's called Mission on Adaptation. You may recall John Kennedy when he came in '60s with his idea of sending a man on the moon. So having a sort of very challenging goal to get there. We have it also in our research and policy, because enough talking about how we should adapt, enough spreading of information. Unless we make it happen, we make it visible to people, we will collectively fail. So what we will do is to prepare Europe for climate disruptions with the goal of EU resilient Europe in 2050. We will cover 150 communities and regions that they design the pathway towards this climate resilience, and they do dispose of climate risk assessments. And we will have at least 75 demonstrations on the spot to show how you can save water, for instance, how you can use satellite data to better forecast the city's development, how you can redesign the city center with the green and blue infrastructure in mind, and so on and so forth. I'm sure the possibilities are indefinite. Then, of course, we need also the citizens on board. And this is where we launched the climate pact. Maybe many of you do not know about it, but climate pact it's an answer to the mobilization of citizens to actually, pass the message that we can do everything we want on climate action. And this is to bring this eager community together. This is to really energize people, bring hope, and get a green transition going, not only through click activism or through, different calls and media articles, but actually bring in people that are, faces of it, and that can be your neighbor, your schoolmaster, your mayor. And we started this endeavor last year. We launched it, and we are a growing community of people who care, who want, and where impossible is not an answer. And part of it is indeed discussions in citizen assemblies, in what we will call peer parliaments, where you can organize yourself in your city, in your community discussions about climate action. This, of course, includes a lot of communities. We talk a lot about youth, but youth doesn't like to be seen as niche. They want to be decision makers. We need businesses, of course, and we see eager startups, but even bigger companies to jump on it. Public administrations. Many of you work in local entities. Academia. We need people who know, but who can also say whether what we do is right, and whether we don't disregard anything. And of course, city can partner in joint pledges, joint commitments with citizens through the participatory budgets. And I can tell you, I was quite pleased to see that many cities started this sort of practice in the neighborhoods of offering a budget, doing a conversation with the citizens, and ranking the projects that will pursue. I've spotted it over my holiday in the city of Rijeka in Croatia. I would never thought about it. With businesses, we see more and more partnerships grown in cities on different parts of infrastructure, be it for waste recycling, for charging of electric vehicles, but why only vehicles, about biking lanes, with NGOs. But we need really the power of people who can mobilize to raise awareness, to shout, and to help implement climate-related actions. I already mentioned academia. We need also the local research to be brought in. I'm from Bratislava, and I'm quite happy that the Slovak Technology University is very much involved with the city on several projects, and of course with youth. As a mother of 3 teenagers, I think they have an indefinite range of good ideas, and they want to be part of this conversation. Thank you very much for listening, and I'm really happy to engage in a debate.
Thank you very much, Eleanor. I want you to imagine that more than 80 people are now clapping you, because we're all very pleased to hear what you are saying, and we will ask you some questions in a moment. But first, it's my great pleasure to introduce Ricardo Rio. Bom dia, Ricardo. Ricardo Rio is the mayor of Braga, and I am a former mayor of Oxford. So from one former mayor to the present mayor, Ricardo, you have the floor.
Good morning, John. Good morning to all the participants in the conference. And actually, Braga and Oxford have something in common. We are very important university cities, and that also links to Elena's presentation, because most of the work that we can do in a city like this has to engage all the institutions and all the citizens, and a city like ours has a specific propension for participating by all the youngsters that live here. I am the mayor of Prague, as you mentioned, and I would like to thank the invitation to participate in this conference. And I am also a member of the Green Deal Going Local working group of the Committee of the Regions, which was an initiative that was launched in 2020 to support local and regional authorities in the efforts to implement the EU strategy for climate neutrality by 2050. And with this initiative, the Committee of the Regions aim to actively contribute to translate the Green Deal objectives into specific actions and to adapt them to territorial specificities of each region and city around Europe. The working group is composed of 13 members from all Committee of the Region commissions, and is chaired by my colleague Juan Espadas from Spain, the mayor of Seville. It is the most concrete example of the core commitment to mainstream climate and environmental priorities across all its activities, and this comprehensive approach to the Green Deal ensures coherence and consistency across all policy areas within the committee, and at the same time consolidates the relevance of municipalities and regions for a fair and successful green transition. The working group is also a point of contact for local and regional authorities that are actively responsible for the implementation of the green transition on the ground, and it contributes to address their challenges and to collect best practices to overcome them. If you listen to the prior presentation and to most of the discussions around the Green Deal and the role of cities, one of the things that this working group has been trying to do is to link these priorities and the EU policies with specific actions and initiatives, with specific tangible projects that can be obviously developed by the municipalities, and obviously to assure that there is a specific funding for these authorities to develop these initiatives. And taking that into account, while the Committee of the Regions actively supports the Green Deal, in a recent opinion that was adopted at the plenary session on July 1, of which I was, and I am the rapporteur, we have reaffirmed the necessity of a more holistic approach to sustainable development at the European level, founded specifically on the Sustainable Development Goals. The Green Deal, with its specific set of measures and objectives, addresses the climate dimension of sustainability, focusing on energy, transport, nature and biodiversity, agriculture, green finance, industry, topics that are obviously very related with many realities of cities at the European level, no matter which its dimension or location. However, in the aftermath of the COVID-19 pandemic and with the introduction of the Recovery and Resilience Facility, it has become more and more evident that the sustainable recovery will only be successful if our environmental, social, and economic objectives are handled adopting an all-encompassing approach. In this regard, the Sustainable Development Goals represent the most comprehensive and ready-to-apply blueprint for a sustainable recovery. And that was the reason why we believe that they embody values and objectives that are the part of the European identity, and the European Commission has already pledged a strong political commitment to their implementation. We can see that local and regional authorities all across Europe are key partners of the EU institutions for the implementation of the Agenda 2030, and they have been very proactive over the past 5 years with their own initiatives of SDGs localization. The activation of the Recovery and Resilience Facility and the projects presented in the National Recovery and Resilience Plans are, in our opinion, the perfect opportunity to provide concrete support and funding to municipalities and regions for their projects of SDGs localization. Also, at the European level, the Recovery and Resilience Fund is linked to the European semester cycle of economic policy coordination, which is also the mechanism chosen by the European Commission to integrate the SDGs and to monitor their application in the upcoming policies and reforms. Therefore, the European semester is the perfect place to coordinate the implementation of the SDGs for a sustainable recovery. My recommendation contains an opinion proposed to map the integration of the SDGs in the national Recovery and Resilience Plan submitted in order to have a solid knowledge base on the state of play of SDGs in member states. The annual SDGs monitoring reports should gain in robustness by including levels of achievement of the SDGs that can be easily quantified. Actually, most of the cities already develop local voluntary assessments of the fulfillment of the goals of the Sustainable Development Goals. The European Commission should make further use of the reports to draft country-specific recommendations. And finally, the Commission should encourage member states to be more inclusive and lead by example by creating a structured dialogue with local and regional authorities in the European semester process, making it more democratic and inclusive. Also at the core and in the European, the Green Deal Going Local Working Group, we will continue to monitor the integration of the SDGs in the European semester, and we will continue to engage with the European Commission, the European Parliament, and other EU institutions to reaffirm the key role of local and regional authorities for the localization of the SDGs, for the success of the Green Deal, and for a sustainable recovery. As a final remark that I would like to leave you in this intervention, the working group gives political direction to all of the Committee of the Regions Green Deal related activities and efforts. So we try to bundle all the commissions, all the members in these specific activities of the group. We always aim to tackle the current priorities and cross-cutting issues to ensure that all 6 of the Committee of the Regions Commissions contribute to the Green Deal in a coherent way, without overlaps and with synergies being exploited to the fullest. Recently, for instance, the working group has decided on a new political and communication campaign on the Green Deal Going Local that aims to upgrade the outreach of the local and regional undertakings within the European Green Deal and support these same levels to go from commitment to action, as we can see almost in many cities across Europe. And my final note is that I believe I can speak for the rest of the group when I say that we will gladly welcome Climate Alliance to one of our meetings so that we can discuss the opportunities and the challenges that our cities are presented and how we can work together to make the best of them. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Ricardo. Thank you for your kind invitation. Obrigado. I want you again to imagine this time nearly 90 people are clapping you and thanking you for your presentation. Thank you very much indeed. We now have an opportunity for questions. If you have a question, please put it in the Q&A or put your name in the Q&A and I think we can call you, but if you can put your question, that is the best. I will start the questions off if I may. I'm going to ask each of you, Elena and Ricardo, what do you think is the single most important thing that the European Commission can do to promote action on the climate emergency in local municipalities? what is you only had one thing you could say that the European Commission should do to help the municipalities, cities and towns, what would that one thing be? And I'm going to ask Ricardo to answer first, please. Ricardo.
Well, thank you, John, for your question. Very directly, I think that there is the will, there is the political commitment. So to ease the concrete initiatives, the biggest demand is the funding. What I think that most of the cities require is direct funding, direct access to funding that can support the initiatives that they will to develop in each of the cities.
I think that's an answer that we can all agree with. Eleanor, what's your view?
Thank you very much. I would build on what Ricardo said. I had something different in my mind, but I would say capacity building. What we see, we are not short of money, John or Ricardo. The problem is to get good projects, excellent people who know to do the project from A to Z, write the project proposal, implement it, gather the community, and then disseminate the project. So I would say for me, the capacity building became the one single, let's say, barrier for local authorities to go more green or to do more of those projects.
Thank you, Eleanor. Now, I hope somebody is making a note of this meeting and they will write down and underline, "We are not short of money," said Eleanor from the European Commission. There we are. We heard it here today. Now, I can continue to ask questions, but I would much prefer that some of the 88 people who are with us today ask questions instead. So could we have another question from somebody else, please?
Yes, John, we have from the audience here from Sarah Macon. She asks, I'd be interested to know how EU initiatives and networks for cities, like the Covenant of Mayors and Climate Alliance, can support the implementation of deeply transformative policies at city level.
Could you repeat the last bit of that? Your sound changed. I'm going to go to Eleanor first before I ask Ricardo to respond. Could you just repeat that question, please?
You can hear me?
The sound is even worse now. Perhaps somebody could...
If I could just ask the question directly.
Please, so much better. So much better.
Yeah, no, Lonnie, maybe if you could leave the session and come back in, it seems like your sound is indeed a bit tricky. No, my question was how EU initiatives like the Covenant of Mayors and how networks for cities like Climate Alliance can support the implementation of the deeply transformative policies that we really need at the local level.
Eleanor.
I must say we count 100% on city networks and for instance, the Covenant of Mayors that is referenced, I think, in every single communication about green policies or policies that matter to cities. I can tell you, if someone would do the data mining, you would find it referenced everywhere. So we count absolutely on those counterparts. But it's different to be a city like Paris and to be a smaller community somewhere in eastern Slovakia with a limited bargaining power even for your funding from the central authorities. So what we try to do through the covenant, and this is really, you must see behind the commission departments for energy, for climate action, for environment. So we try to do to work a lot on this capacity building. We amplify these voices vis-a-vis also other departments that are much more rich than climate action is. I always like to say that Department for Climate Action is rather a Cinderella of the Commission, although 30% of the budget in the future should be mainstream into climate related expenses. expenditure. So we amplify these voices. There's a lot going on in terms of regional funding and catching up from the department responsible for urban policy and regional policy for funding. There are cities that can access directly the funding. I think it will be 6% in the new programming period, where they don't need necessarily to always go through the central government. And we give a certain vision where Europe should be. We have the capacity in our institutions to make all these modeling, forecasting, etc. A lot of studies are being prepared. A lot of climate risk assessments will be done through the mission on adaptation. And this is all put at the disposal of cities to see, how they can go transformative. And one last point, I never thought of it, but, few mayors told me that already the fact of being the connector with the cities, orchestrating, organizing, the events, the exchanges, showing the best practices, bringing them in the public sphere is already a huge step forward for the cities to get inspired to say, okay, I have the same problem as the city, they solve it that way, probably let's think it through. That's already something that can give the recipe for these transformative policies to happen also in your place.
Thank you, Eleanor. Ricardo, how do you answer?
Well, John, I would say that it is very important to lead by example, and therefore, when all the networks that are linked to these topics, all the efforts and specific groups that are developing within each of the networks like Eurocity, CMR, and others that are connected with sharing best practices. For instance, there is currently a project that is led by Pact, in which Prague also participates, in which we try to share best practices across all the member states. At the Committee of the Regions and connected with the Covenant of Mayors, we have created this year the Chamber of National Ambassadors, which are 27, I'm the Portuguese one, which represent each of the member countries. And all these exchange of best practices and all these links in joint projects are really very, very important. But I would add to my initial answer to the first question, and also to what Elena mentioned, to say that I also agree that probably we aren't short of money. The question is how this money reaches the territory and how it reaches the active agents in the territory, which are the local and regional authorities. And in many countries like mine, there is such a big centralization and such a big control by the national member states that maybe we should try to create more direct links to the cities and to the city networks to support projects that are developed by this level of governance and which produce the most effect. For instance, if we talk about the Sustainable Development Goals, there's a study by the OECD and by other institutions in which 65% of the goals can only be achieved at the local level. And taking that into account, I think that it is important, sure, to strengthen the capacity building, but on top of that, we have to also reinforce the direct link with these local and regional authorities.
Obrigado, Ricardo. Now we have some questions coming through on the question and answer list. They are questions with lots of initials, lots of letters, which I don't necessarily understand. But we'll ask the question, and I hope that either Eleanor or Ricardo can help. The first question is from Ulrika Schmeitzel, who is in Wels in Austria. She asked, what about TTIP? TTIP. Can anybody help with TTIP? Thomas, are you trying to speak to me?
Sorry, yeah, I wanted just to ask you to skip this question because the TTIP has nothing to do with our topic today. So let's move on the agenda, please.
Okay, what does it
We
stand?
will collect the questions and then we can share it in the discussion.
Okay. Then we have another question from Matthias Sin. It's not the capacity building, he said. It's about, it's what Ricardo mentioned in terms of budget. Are there any efforts to change the money flow from the Commission to the communities? So, Eleanor, you still haven't convinced Matthias. What can you do to please him?
I think you need to invite someone else to this hot seat. As I said, we are not in charge of funding, and we internally, as a Department for Climate Action, we have to convince our counterparts quite often what matters and what not. Yes, the money flow is as it is under the cohesion funding, which means that the Commission has a deal with a member state under the so-called shared management arrangement, and then it is the member state central agency or central ministry that launches the calls and prepares the projects. Nevertheless, I can reassure Matthias that we have quite a huge leverage on the deal we seal with the member state, which is the so-called partnership agreement, where we have to put very clearly on the paper, the areas that need to be covered. And I can tell you, with the mainstreaming target of 30%, this leverage is relatively high. There are nevertheless also funds where people can apply directly. It's under central management, and so the flow is relatively direct. It's typically the LIFE instrument. This is the instrument for protection of environment. It exists for decades. It's a sort of breeding ground for very good projects that can be then picked up by bigger funds. We have the innovation fund that is really for the sort of breakthrough innovations, and I do believe that cities do have this possibility for presenting these breakthrough innovations. So I would not like to paint just a sort of bleak picture of how it is. You need to find the necessary information, but there are also many opportunities that are waiting out there directly without the need of going through the central government. Nevertheless, we all need to get trained and to convinced about projects. I can tell you that when we were discussing, for instance, the recovery plan with Slovakia, because I'm responsible in DG Klima for following this, it has been a very enriching, iterative process, and it showed me it is very difficult still for the local authorities or for the individuals to visualize what a green economy is in real terms, what a green economy family is, what a green economy skill is. So we have still there a lot to learn, and I think this is where you communities already dealing with these matters, you have upper hand, and you can bring this more assertively even to the conversations.
Thank you, Eleanor. M. Weigold is not to be outdone. If they can't ask one question, they will ask another. So I have another question, this time to Ricardo. And the question is, SDGs are already integrated in local plans. How did you initiate and organize this process? So I think what I want to know, please, Ricardo, is how you managed in your city to integrate the SDGs, please.
Well, what we try to do is the same thing that we are defending at the European level or national level, is to link the political priorities and initiatives to the assessment of the results and the impact in each of the goals. Here in Braga, we have just issued our first sustainability report, in which we've collected a lot of data concerned with matters that obviously link to sustainability. Before that, we already had in development a project with a university from Portugal, the Catholic University from Lisbon, which allowed us to have an annual sustainability index linked with the Sustainable Development Goals, in which each of the indicators, over 150, are, according to the national stats, assessed, and where we can see not only the result of our city, the progress from year to year, but also some sort of comparison with other realities and other cities in the country. And I think that this type of work, in which we link the assessment and the accountability with the spreading of the word and the spreading of the commitment in which we have to engage, everybody mentioned Elena and myself, the institutions and the citizens in the goals, is very important because it links policy with results. And I think in all the areas that is crucial.
Thank you, Ricardo. I have a question myself, which I would like to ask, and I think this must be the last one because I think we have to move on. But it seems to me that we have to find the money and the capacity to make the necessary changes because of the climate emergency, and we should make local municipalities already have money to spend, whether they have new money from the European Commission or not, and that the municipalities and indeed the European Commission should make every euro a green euro. Would you agree, Elena?
That's a leading question. Of course, I agree. A green euro is definitely an investment into the future. And we all know how our economies so far function. We are crediting our young generation that will have to pay back this debt. So really investing into a sort of greener, better future is definitely, making at least this debt a meaningful one.
Thank you. Ricardo, do you agree with me that we should be making every euro a green euro?
Definitely. And I think that one of the important topics that we have to stress is working for a greener Europe doesn't mean that we have to weaken our economic development. And to work for a greener Europe can obviously even foster new economic opportunities, new businesses. Just to give you a very brief example, here we have in Braga one of the most important research institutions, which is the International Laboratory of Nanotechnology. And the INL has just launched a specific project together with many companies from the country and many other research institutes, which is called Batteries 2030, in which they are developing a new system of producing, charging, and storing energy. And this is obviously a great opportunity from the business point of view, and therefore we will succeed in making that area more environmental friendly, but at the same time to create new business opportunities. And that link is obviously very, very important. And as this is my last intervention, I'll once again thank the invitation and greet Anushka Rug for her great work in the drawing.
Thank you, Ricardo. Thank you, Elena. We are very grateful. I only wish I could invite you, well, I can invite you to Oxford to come and see the work that we're doing. And I know that in this room there are many municipalities doing wonderful work already, and I hope we will be able to do more in the future. So again, I want you to imagine now more than 90 of us are clapping Ricardo and Elena. Thank you very much, Ricardo. And now we're going to move to part 2, the principles of transformation. And I'm very pleased to introduce Tina Hesse, who is the chair of Climate Alliance from Ghent, and together with Thomas Brose, our director of Climate Alliance, they are going to introduce this whole idea of how we bring about the changes, how we have what should be the principles of transformation, both at a local, national and international level. So I would like to give the floor to my good friend, Tina Hesse, please. Tina.
John, sorry.
Yes, Thomas.
Yeah, may I start maybe to introduce in the charter, and then I can hand over to Tina.
I want everybody
because we are running a little bit late, so I will keep it very, very short. But I also wanted to raise your attention. Maybe you have seen, and Ricardo mentioned that there is a slide with some drawings. So this is a graphical.
Yes, we can.
Sorry. So this is a graphical recording that Anushka, our colleague, is doing as a sort of documentation of our discussion. Just that you know when this slide appears, this is sort of documentation. So yeah, the principles for transformation. So as I mentioned at the beginning, before the conferences in our General Assembly, we adopted the Wales Declaration, which is a document that for us, for our members, is very important in the sense to reconnect to our self-commitments in the cities that our members have since the founding of Climate Alliance 30 years ago, and to make clear that we need much more ambitious targets. But that the how the transformation should be implemented is also very relevant for us, and that's why we developed these principles and describing a little bit the giving orientation to our members. Describing also the challenge that they have and the discussions that are ahead of us, because I think the discussion of the how will be the main element of our political discussions on national, local, and international level. And here we try to develop some principles. So I would like to ask Tina what she thinks or why she thinks principles are important for developing actions, and maybe also the experience in the city of Ghent, why these principles are important. And because we are running a little bit out of time, I would like to, Tina, after answering these questions, maybe go directly to your intervention, so we can collect, if there are questions, we can collect them and ask them at the end. So we can spare a little bit of time. So thank you, Tina.
Thank you, Thomas.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Yes, the principles, of course, very important. I think after this summer, it should be clear that there's now or never. It's now or never. But even now, we really have to think what we are going to do and how we're going to do it. So it's indeed not only about numbers. It's also about, for example, if we only would reduce or focus on the reduction of CO2 emissions, we might risk that the ecosystems and biodiversity will continue to be damaged, the earth depleted, water resources drained, and people still would live in energy poverty. So it is really necessary that we still, and even more than ever, adopt a more holistic views, and that are these principles. So it's not only what we do, it is also how we do it. It's about climate justice. It's about who pays and who gains. And yesterday we had already a session on energy poverty, and I'm really glad we did, because climate justice must be something that we take into account in everything we do. We must make sure that climate policies are fair and that poor and vulnerable people also become part of the transition. At the same time, because as a deputy mayor, we have our boots on the ground. And I also want to give one example that at the same time that climate justice may not be misused for defending the status quo. And I give you just one example of this week in my city. In my city, we have a huge discussion, and that's good, on low emission zones and how to deal with mobility. So how can you do it in a just way? Now, some people are defending, we as a city, we don't want to allow people anymore to have a second car that they just can put on public ground, on the streets. And so some people say, oh, that is not just. So they're defending the right of people to have two cars and to put it and to use public parking spots. That is not climate justice. The climate justice is about 50% of people in some areas of my city can't afford to have a car. So so climate justice is always about who is gaining, who is paying, and really defending the rights of the poor people, and not defending the status quo. We always have to put the global picture into account, and we certainly have to ask always the same question: are our solutions real? Is it about genuine savings of CO2s? We have to focus on local solutions that are sustainable in the long term. So we have to think also the protection of nature and biodiversity and the entire planetary ecosystem. So I think our new declaration is really, really important because it's a big step forward. We, as Climate Alliance, we should embrace this holistic approach more than ever. So it's not only about numbers, it's not only about the metrics, the targets, but we must do much more, much faster in a good way. So I think we do know how to do it with technology, but also about policy, with policy, also about discussions about what do we need, what do we really need, and so on. So I think with Climate Alliance, we are leading the way, but I think I might make my points a bit clearer by giving my presentation so that things, because we don't have much time, so we can speed up with giving my presentation. So if somebody could share my presentation.
And we wait for the technology. That's life these days.
Yes. The EU Green Deal, with the EU Green Deal, the EU is enlarging the scope and taking a broad range of topics into account: clean air, biodiversity, food policy, and circular economy. Now in Ghent, we launched our third climate plan, and our climate policy goes certainly beyond direct CO2 emissions within the city limits. We also address the indirect CO2 emissions by focusing on consumption, food, and circularity. In our third climate action plan, so in the previous one, we paid a great deal already of attention to local food policy and strategy, and we are continuing to develop it, scale up, and embedding it in our food strategy. And during this term, we are also increasing our focus on circular economy. Next. So today I will demonstrate a bit how we do it and how we already introduced these principles. In Ghent, we launched already 8 years ago, in 2030, our Ghent Sustainable Food Policy. And why? Why? Food contributes to the environmental impact of a city in many ways: transport, storage, preparation, food waste. Meat production, for example, has a significant impact on greenhouse gases emissions. Halving the meat and dairy consumption in the EU would reduce the greenhouse gas emissions of the agriculture industry by 42%. So that's just one example. So what do we do? We really want to work to a sustainable food system. And we do that by taking different steps. We look at the regional food production, how to make the supply chain shorter, fairer, and more sustainable. How to improve access to land for farmers and connect the local production to the city's market. We, of course, also work on sustainable and healthy diets for all. The city is also above all a large group of citizens and consumers. So if we want to impact the food system and reduce our climate footprint, we have to impact eating behaviors, impact menus at home, but also in our schools and restaurants. And of course, we also work on social equity, ensuring that everyone in our city has access to sustainable and healthy food. And finally, we also work on food waste. But now, how do we do it? As a local government, we are, of course, only one of the actors in the food system. One of the strengths, I think, of our food policy is that we always work through co-creation, together with different stakeholders from across the food system. And we represent them in the Food Policy Council. This council is a mix of agriculture groups, small-scale farmers, commerce, chefs, poverty organizations, researchers, and so on. And it's grown and evolved over time. We pioneer it in our policy work, and this Food Policy Council also has its own budget, some budget authority to decide on how part of the city's budget is spent on food initiatives. And next one, we do have results. I won't read all the issues here, but it's quite clear that we do have a lot of results, and that is how it should be. Now, the question is, can we expand this model, this approach? I think so, because we want to launch a similar approach to circular economy this autumn. Of course, it will not be an exact copy, but we can learn from it. I will now focus only on two examples of transformative action that has brought structural change to the city's food system. Next. So I hope you know that unfortunately, a lot of food is wasted. So we really wanted to focus on doing something about it. So what did we do? We launched Food Savers. What is Food Savers? It's a logistic platform that gathers food surpluses from retailers, wholesale markets, and farms and brings them to social organizations working with people in poverty. And what was essential is that by taking up the logistic as a city, Food Savers reduces the burden on social organizations that often lack volunteers, logistic capacity, and cooling infrastructure to handle these huge amounts of food surpluses. It is, of course, also a way to reduce environmental footprint of food waste by making sure surpluses are used for human consumption. And we also, the project also increased social employment. Food Saver is operated by people coming from long-term unemployment. And of course, the project helps in fighting poverty. Again, this climate justice is important, giving people in need access to healthy food. So what are the results? Next one. The results are huge. That were the results of the 2 years. Our results even increased. So we in total more than 1,000 tons of food have been saved and redistributed to 40,000 people in poverty. And it's mostly about fresh fruit and vegetables. That has led to CO2 reduction of almost 2,500 tons. And 25 people coming from unemployment have been trained. Another project where there's a strong link between food and climate is the Veggie, next one. Veggie Thursday. We became in Ghent in 2009 a bit famous because we launched Veggie Thursday. So it's already more than 10 years ago. As the name suggests, Thursday in Ghent became Veggie Days. And it was in schools, in the restaurants of the administration, and so on and so on. The campaign has contributed to the acceptance of vegetarian alternatives and a better knowledge among citizens of the link between meat consumption and climate change. But of course, we want to go further. In 2019, Ghent also signed the Cool Food Pledge, a commitment to reduce our CO2 emissions linked to food procurement with 25% by 2030. And soon we will launch a new campaign, a successor to the Veggie Thursday, with a focus on protein transition, a real protein transition. Today, 60% of our protein comes from animal products and 40% comes from plant-based and alternative projects. Our goal is to reverse it, and consumption of animal versus plant and alternative proteins. So we want to make a shift towards more plant-rich diets. That are a number of challenges. The most important thing will be to get the cattle breeders on board as well, because that is, of course, also necessary. We want less meat consumption, but produced in a sustainable way with better quality and a fair price. In this way, we also want to take the producers with us in this transition, because real change will only come when all actors in the chain take action to work towards the same goal. I hope with this example and focusing on our local food transition, I also made clear that the principles we are using in Ghent already, and of course we want to improve it in the future. Thank you.
Dank u wel, Tina. If I couldn't live in Oxford, I think I would move to Ghent. And now I have great pleasure in introducing Julie Lanos. Bonjour, Julie. Bienvenue. You have the floor, Julie.
So I'm going to address the way we act with the different stakeholders in localizing the Green Deal. Tina mentioned one part on the food policy and how they worked in Ghent on the way to act with the different stakeholders. I just wanted to mention beforehand that we have a real problem with our democracy that is not going that well, not well in Europe, but not well in the world, I would say. In France, we had municipal elections in 2020, so last year, and the participation rate was only 38% for the municipal elections. 6 years ago, it was 54%. It occurred within the Corona crisis on March 2020. That might explain some, but on the second round in June, it was not higher. We just had regional elections where the participation rate was even lower. Only 31% of the people participated, which means that if we want to, and we have to take urgent measures in favor of climate and change things, if we don't have the citizen participating or believing in the local governments or the national governments, it's a real challenge. It's an additional challenge. So that engages us to act more deliberately outside the election times on climate strategies with the different stakeholders, even those who didn't go to vote. The other aspect of that is that we know that in order to be able to go much further in climate actions, we need the different stakeholders to act by themselves with us. But we know also that often local governments, national governments are much slower in reacting and less creative than the different stakeholders that can come with propositions. That's the way we designed or our philosophy in the way we act on different policies, but especially on energy transitions. That's why in 2016 and 17 we had a big energy transition debate, engaging the different stakeholders. I won't give you too much numbers, but we had 53,000 participants. Just to make it, we have about 600,000 inhabitants. So that gives you a proportion of people that engage in the energy transition debate. And we had more than 270 organizations that participated, and it resulted in a collective roadmap with 33 actions. I won't bore you with those 33 actions, but the main challenge we had afterwards was how do we have an open governance? How do we decide where we should put more effort and what is working out and what is not working out? And how do we remain, how can we still challenge and trigger new actions and more actions of the different stakeholders? We are launching in the merge of COP26, so in the fall, a new set, because also since 2016 and 17, new actors and new networks emerge in the city. So how to make them part of the deal as well. We have launched as well a citizen convention. I don't know if France, there was a climate citizen convention on the national level that came up a bit like in Germany. One of the speakers mentioned it beforehand, to come up with new concrete actions to take climate action to another level. We had one that addressed the corona, the world after corona. We unfortunately are not completely out of corona, but 80 citizens were drawn, and what came out of there, the propositions they made, was that they needed and they urged the local governments, but also the different stakeholders, to take more resolute action in favor of more social justice and climate action. And also what was remarkable was that a lot of citizens were wanting to take more steps themselves. So asking for extension of the public transport system, before, for example, and wanting to leave their car behind. So you see there is a real transition and there is a real ground to go much further than we do. We, when you give the floor to citizens, you see that there is an urge to more climate action, and that's the ground we can build the action upon. The last point I wanted to address was the economy. We have talked about the economy, but when we had the transition debate, the economic actors were the ones that participated less to the debate. But we see that if we profoundly want to change the system, we have to go much further than just a local climate action plan. We have to address with the holistic approach Tina mentioned, we have to address what we consume, what we produce, how we relocalize the production, because we know that a lot of our CO2 emissions are produced in other countries and we import them in what we consume. We have, since this new, since the last election, so in 2020, we have engaged with the economic actors in a big debate with them to address the economic resiliency and the transition that is needed. So to see what the green economy will be like in 10, 20, and 30 years, what capacities we have, what education skills we have, and how we transform the economy. So it's not just the economic policy is shifting towards just attracting and be attractive for big companies to come to Nantes, into we want to choose the economic actors and we want to have something that makes sense within our climate action plan. So that's the shift or the new governance we are addressing, because in the radical change we need to organize and foresee what it will be like and what economy we will need. And I think the economic actors, at least the ones that are discussing things with us, all the economic organizations, are very well aware of the corona crisis and the fact that the companies that resisted best were the ones that respected the social values and the environmental most, that were the companies who had less trouble during the economic crisis. So that's why we talk about resiliency in the economy, to have a resilient economy. That were the points I wanted to stress in this part.
Merci beaucoup, Julie. We now move to some questions and discussion. And we already have a question to Tina Heiser in Ghent from, I hope I pronounced this correctly, Hadi Fleger. He or she says, how to motivate people to eat less meat. Although going veggie is cheaper, people still like to eat meat. Could you tell us, Tina, how do we get people to eat less meat? Tina, you have the floor.
Well, make sure it's nice and it tastes well and it looks good. And that's the way to go. I give you one example. We have a lot of local schools. And of course, we want our kids to eat also vegetarian food, but we also want them to like it. In the past, to be honest, the school meals were not of good quality. The vegetarian and the non-vegetarian, both were not very tasteful. So what we did is that we really changed it. And we even invited parents and children to taste the food. We choose another supplier of the food. It looks better, it tastes better. So that's the thing. And everybody who eats vegetarian knows that it can be very tasteful, that it can look very good. And so that's what you have to do. And so if people like it, they don't care if it's vegetarian or not vegetarian. So that's the way forward. And we have very good results. We also invested in the schools who are educating the future cooks in schools and everything, so that they are used to make extreme good vegetarian food. And we have also a lot of restaurants, also of the very high quality restaurants, offer vegetarian food. So make vegetarian food mainstream, make it tasteful, and I'm sure you will have good results.
And I think use lots of garlic and lots of onions. And a question to Julie as well, from Lara Mutta. She asks, how do you avoid frustrations against the democratic institutions if the citizens' propositions are not implemented? So I think she is asking, when we have the citizens' assemblies and they want to take some action, how do you, but then the action doesn't happen. How do you avoid that? How do you deal with that problem? Julie.
That's the main reason for success or not success, because we saw that the climate convention on the national level, the government didn't take into account about like more than half of the propositions of the citizens, which make those democratic processes very frustrating for everybody. So that's the main challenge we face now, is how do we have this open governance where we decide together. We had a group of citizens from the debate and kind of experts, local experts, discussing this, but it was quite difficult to find the right way to expertise within, because you sometimes need more technical expertise from what are the actual results, and the results on energy transition, for example, the decrease of CO2 emissions. Well, you can't really observe that on the short term. You need to have the figures and the research on the long term. So we are still looking into how to track the local roadmap. And as I said, we are trying to integrate new, more radical green or environmental activists in the way they can ask us questions and urge us to act differently. So we are just kind of looking, and we are kind of assuming the fact that we don't have the answer how to build it completely together. But the direct dialogue is also a good thing, because the activist networks can sometimes be in opposition to the local governments. And the fact that we make it possible to discuss things together, well, I think that stresses the way we want to continue, and we need them to urge us to act more proactively, because that helps the institution as well to go faster. So I guess there's no clear answer, but the thing is also that the roadmap we designed is not just the action of the city of Nantes, but it's also the action of the other stakeholders, so the economic stakeholders or the other stakeholders. So in fact, we are all kind of looking at each other, but we are convinced that if we act together, then we can, and that just the city can enhance things or start up things or put people in the same room, different actors that then take up action. And that's different, that's difficult to measure, but I think everybody finds the way in that. And I think we didn't really reject a lot of action or propositions that were made. That's also a point. And the way we designed the roadmap was to design it together. So it was not just the city who said we are going to do such and such measures. It was a group of 4 citizens that were governing the debate. So it was not the institution itself who designed the roadmap, but it was the citizens themselves. So that's a way also to avoid frustrations, I guess.
Thank you, Julie. Yes, here in Oxford, we have just made an agreement with the universities, the hospitals, the bus companies, the car factory, because we want to reach zero carbon in Oxford. As you say, it's not enough just for the municipality to make the decision. Now, I have a question for all of you about how we replicate your excellent experience in Nantes, in Ghent, in Vienna. Do you have any experience of helping other municipalities to take the actions that you are taking in your cities relating to climate emergency? How do we help other cities to take action? And I wonder if I could ask Tina first and then Julie. Tina.
I think as a frontrunner city, we should really give our experiences and share it. Of course, we also can learn from others. So what I invest quite a lot of time in sharing our experiences. What works best is if you do it in your own region or own country. Why? Because you have the same legislation. Of course, we do learn from examples abroad in other countries, but quite often if you come home with a good example of another country, you come home and the legislation is so different that you can't apply it. So first start in sharing experiences in your own countries, make networks. We made it possible that within the organization of all cities, there's now also a kind of climate policy working group where we can share this examples. Also, of course, sometimes in your own party, work together with deputy mayors who work on the same issues, and so share it and learn. Of course, never think that you are the only good example. Share it and learn also from others. That's also important, but it does work. I'm very happy that we were the first in Belgium to launch a local food strategy, and now more and more other cities do it as well. So I would say some competition in this kind of areas is very good.
Thank you, Tina. Thank you. And Julie, how do you help other municipalities?
Well, we do exactly what Tina said. I think we are all part of European networks or international networks. So we share our experience with the front runners, which feed us back, and then we have to apply it differently I have a tendency to look at my other country, which is the Netherlands, to see what they are doing, and then steal some of their good ideas and put them back here in Nantes. But that's my, I would say, natural inclination. Then I really agree with Tina as well. We're very involved in the national networks as well, because we have the same network, and sometimes we have to fight together against the government to be able to get more money or to decentralize a bit the policies, because we all know that the action takes place in cities, but we cannot finance everything. So I think it's both tackling the things together because we're stronger together, and then we have another, I think, challenge is that as a big city, the medium cities or the smaller cities or the rural areas around us, when we talk about food policy, for example, we know that we cannot feed the city just on the city ground, so it's interaction with the areas around us. But sometimes they find the cities quite arrogant because we have the means and the people to work on climate policies and to be front runners. So that is how to engage in a real dialogue as equal partners in some sense, and to make to move forward together, because the cities alone cannot tackle neither the energy transition, neither the food transition, because we know that we will not be able to produce enough energy from renewable energies just on our grounds, and it's the same for the food. So it's how we engage this dialogue and how it's a win-win situation with the other areas around us. I think that's one of the main challenges we see here now as well.
Thank you, Julie. Now, if there are no more questions, we can perhaps even finish on time. Maybe a little early, but I would like to take the opportunity to thank the artist who is drawing our discussion. I have sat in many meetings and seen people taking minutes, taking notes. I've taken notes in many meetings myself, and they're always very boring. But today we have a visual picture of what we're discussing, what Herbert is saying, what Julie is saying, what Tina is saying. And I would think we should thank the artist very much. So I want the artist to imagine that we are all clapping and saying, well done. It looks very good. Are there any other questions? If not, we can move towards the close. Any other questions? Any other interventions? Okay. Well, thank you very much for all our speakers. It's been a great privilege for me here in Oxford to chair this, to preside at this session. And I would like to thank you very much for all your presentations and for the work that you do in your cities, because the carbon emissions that you are saving is helping my city. And I hope the carbon emissions I am saving in Oxford is helping your city. This is an international endeavour and will always be so. For the final remarks, I'd like now to give the floor to our Director of Climate Alliance, Thomas Broos. Thomas.
Okay, thank you very much, John. And also many thanks for all the presentations. I think they were very inspiring and very interesting in the sense to contribute to this learning process that we have in our different networks. And that's one of the main goals of the different networks is to exchange experience, best practices, but also the challenge and the problems that we are or you are having in the implementation of activities, because I think it's also very important to identify where are the obstacles and the problems in the implementation of such activities, so that we can take these experiences into the discussion with in the different levels, on the national level, but also on the European level, to address the obstacles and the problems that are being faced by you when you are implementing activities. So maybe I will try. I think it's difficult to summarize everything. I think the graphical recording done by Anushka will contribute maybe more. But I would like to maybe highlight some specific topics that I think are very important, also from our participants from the EU Commission and the Committee of the Region in the beginning. First, hearing that it's good to hear that we don't have a problem of money. But this is also a message that we heard yesterday in our discussions in the opening of the conference, that often it's not a problem of financial limits, but it's more on the administrative processes, the legislation. These are main obstacles in the implementation. First, I think for me, one important message is that the understanding that the climate or the transition, the energy transition, climate transition that we are in is more than only the reduction of CO2. I think this is very important. This is also one of the main elements of our declaration. All of you highlighted this topic, and also Elena from the Commission showed very clearly that we need a broader approach than only the reduction of CO2 emission. Although, of course, the CO2 emission is in the center of our activities, because if we do not reduce the emissions, this will cause much more problems in the future. But it's the understanding that the transformation processes are much broader than, let's say, only reducing the CO2 emission, because we need transformation in the use of the resources, in the way we organize our working life, our mobility, and all the other topics. And I think it's also important as a message here from Wales, from Upper Austria, but also in Austria and also in other countries. Please do not forget the small communities in rural areas. I think this is a very important message, especially from us, from Climate Alliance, because there are many other networks that do not include and do not work directly with very small municipalities. And we have a lot of good experiences coming from these small communities. But we need also to understand that cooperation between rural area and urban area in many topics is very important, in the mobility, in the energy production, and so on. So this is something we should keep in our, let's say, agenda, how to organize the cooperation and the building a sort of bridge between the urban and the rural areas. I think it's also very important that Ricardo Rio mentioned the Agenda 2030, so the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, should be also part of the strategies. So always when we talk about climate, we should include the social and other aspects. And this is something I think that speakers like Tine, Mr. Ritter, and Julie also mentioned in their presentations. If we are talking about energy poverty or dialogue and participation, or if we tackle the food topic, this is going beyond, let's say, the traditional activities that we know from just reducing our emissions, and that's why I think it's very important. Taking also the message from, let's say, from our discussions that we had yesterday and today, and something that also Elena highlighted, is that we know a lot, we have a lot of information, and now we have to act, so we need the actors and the doers. And you in the cities, you are the ones who are implementing the activities. You are making experiences in the different areas, and there is no other organization that has this amount of experience in their network. So we have cities. Yesterday we commemorated the 30 years of Upper Austria Climate Alliance. So you'll see that communities and cities are already working for a long time on all these topics, and all these experiences we have to bring together to summarize, take some lessons learned, and to bring it into the political level and influence the development of strategies and also funding opportunities for cities. I think this is a very important action that we have to take, or at least we are already in this action. For example, through the Covenant of Mayors, which is an important or the most important initiative on not only at a European level, but also on a global perspective, bridging, let's say, the direct dialogue and cooperation between cities, communities, regions, and the Commission. Now, also through the Committee of the Region, with the ambassadors going into the national level, including the national level in these strategies. I think this is very important. I think the specific experiences you made on the ground, like for example, the participation process that Julie described in Nantes, I think it's very important. And I think what she mentioned that the space for a direct dialogue, it's very important, and that also in this process, it's very important to be careful not to create too much expectations that you then cannot deliver. And that's why I think a permanent dialogue process is important. And I think it's something, it's a learning process, I think, also for the cities, because participatory processes are not on, let's say, the daily agenda of in the cities. And sometimes it's it can be challenging, but I think it's important because also what Elena mentioned from the Commission, the inclusion and the participation can only be done together with the citizens if we want really to localize the SDGs or the implementation of the Green Deal. And that's why it's important to develop good strategies and good examples. Also, focusing on the topic of energy poverty is something that we are already dealing for many years in Climate Alliance. And now, with the responsibility with the Climate Energy Poverty Hub, I think we will further develop our experience, our knowledge, and taking the experiences from the ground, from Vienna and from other cities into this arena, and developing strategies and policy instruments. I know because we have been in Ghent some years ago, I think, to learn on the ground, to see the experience of the food activities in the city of Ghent, which is very interesting to see the process that is around. I think we gave a sort of first insight, but if you are there and you talk to the people, you see that this is much more than only, let's say, dealing with the food topic, which is so essential, and that's why it's so relevant for the people, for their lives, and how to discuss all these things that are linked to the topic of food. I think this is a very, very good and important experience. And of course, the replication of these experiences is very important, as I already mentioned. Learning from each other, but also showing, as you also mentioned, that you, for example, have to take in consideration the national legislation that not everything can be implemented automatically in every city. So this is also an important learning lesson from this experience. Yeah, so these are my remarks and my comments from the side. So thanks again also for your inputs. I think I'm always very happy to after hearing, let's say, analysis about why we have these problems. I'm also very happy to hear that a lot of cities are already working on the solutions, because we know a lot why we are in this situation, but we don't know what are the solutions, because there is no blueprint to develop this, and we have to learn from exactly these experiences. You are seeing this graphic recording. We will provide you with the documentation. I also want to mention our Mentimeter that you can use to put your expressions, and maybe we can show how it is, how the cloud is at the moment. So here is the link for the Mentimeter, and a lot of messages have been already included in it. I would like to thank John for his excellent moderation from Oxford. So this shows that even if you are not formally in the EU, but we are still connected through our networks and our topics on the level of the cities. I think this is also a very important message that the networks bring. Thank you, Tine, thank you, Julie, and thank you, Mr. Ritter, for your participation, for your input. But I also want to thank our team that you are not seeing here. We have colleagues in Brussels, in Frankfurt, and also here in Wales, who are very hard trying to fix the technical problems. We have some translation from to German and also in Russian, so also your messages have been translated to Russian. Thank you very much for the translators, for the team behind the scenes who make it possible that we can have these discussions. I hope next year we will have the opportunity to meet again. And yeah, John, thank you very much for your moderation and your participation. So wish you all a good day, and now we will have the next workshop sessions here, and at 1 p.m. we have the closing of the conference. So thank you very much and have a good day.
Thank you, Thomas. Thank you everyone for coming.